Oh no. I see that the recording is automatic. So welcome everyone to the eLearning Indaba. We are going to be taking about 5 or so minutes to make sure that everybody gets joined and logged in.
I think what would be really nice if we could start just seeing where everyone's joining in from. Where in the world are you dialing in? If you could just put it in the chat.
There we go. I see we've got quite a few people who've just joined. A very warm welcome to you. You'll find your chat at the bottom of your screen. We've got Stellenbosch, Durban, Johannesburg, Cape Town. We've got Melinda from Boksburg. Welcome, everyone. We're going to take a few minutes as everybody joins. We've got Talia. Got some people dialing in from the West Rand. Empangeni. Charlene, I grew up in Richards Bay, so I know Empangeni quite well. We've got Durban, Johannesburg. So mostly a South African audience so far. There we go. Mandy from Durban, welcome. Rena, welcome. We've got the Midlands. And Candy from Johannesburg, very warm welcome to you.
I see a couple of people from Australia, someone from Mozambique. Welcome.
Fantastic to have you all here. And Goodness from Johannesburg, Mandy from Australia. Megan from Cape Town. We've got Limpopo, Kenya. Welcome. Johannesburg. All right, we're going to wait a minute or two, and then we are going to kick off. So for those of you who've just joined, we are typing into chat, where in the world are you dialing in from? Oh, we've got Vienna, Austria. Welcome, Irene. Cape Town, Midrand, Johannesburg, Western Cape. Welcome, Annalise. Limpopo, Cape Town, Somerset West, Andile, welcome. Malcolm is from PE. There we go. I think nearly everybody is here. So I think as we get started, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping rules. We have got the chat, which everybody has been using to let us know where they're dialing in from. So you definitely know where to find that. So we're going to be using the chat for sort of general comments and conversation. And then if you have any specific questions that you would like answered by the speakers from today, you can use the Q&A pod, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to save those questions for an open panel discussion at the end of the session for the last 20 minutes. So do use that if you have any questions relating to our speakers. And then, yes, we are going to, I think, get started. So I'm going to introduce your first speaker today, who is Paul Hanley. Paul Hanley is the founder of Newleaf Technologies, and which was founded in 2015. He's also been on the board of numerous directors, and he has been passionate about learning and development for many, many years. So he's going to be doing our first talk, which is about what is the right technology in learning. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Paul. If you have any questions, do put them in the Q&A pod, and enjoy the speech, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Shireen, and welcome to everybody to our last Indaba of the year. And what a year it's been. I'm just going to quickly share my screen and let me know when you can see it.
Yes, we can see it. Just need to pop it into presenter mode.
Sorry, it's about to happen. Right. So, first of all, what I wanted to do is just really introduce Newleaf Technologies, and those of you that are new to the Indaba, just explain a little bit about it. Really, the eLearning Indaba is something that we started back in early 2015. It was a fairly small group of people back then that we ran once a year. And it now runs sort of 2 or 3 times a year. And it's a hybrid, sometimes online, sometimes we hold it at a venue. And it's nice to see this audience grow, both locally and internationally. And really, next year, we're going to ask you to look out for a much bigger session, which is likely to happen mid-year, sometime probably around about June. And that one will be a hybrid, so it'll be both online and face-to-face. But Newleaf Technologies, really, we're an end-to-end e-learning solutions provider. Sorry, I'll just have to hide something on my screen here because it's getting in my way. So we're an end-to-end e-learning solutions provider. So that's a complete end-to-end service. That includes the learning technologies, your LMSs, your LXPs, those sorts of things. We also have a content development service with a whole team sitting here in Johannesburg, and these days elsewhere as well. And that's really to help you build your own content. And the other really important division is our integrations and custom development division. And that team looks at different systems that you have in the business, and we integrate those systems together so that really we look at reducing administration as much as possible. And of course, we have around about 30,000 ready-made courses across all sorts of topics that can plug directly into the platform, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But in essence, what we look to do is to elevate your training to its full online potential. This year has been a very exciting one for us. 2022 is our 5th consecutive year of 50+% growth, which is pretty phenomenal. Our core product is a product called a New Spring, and a New Spring is a learner experience platform with a bunch more than just LXP functionality in it. And I'm really excited to tell you that specifically for the South African market, we've just launched the internal and external moderation tabs in that platform. And that means that students can come onto that platform, go through all of their experiences. We can then get a facilitator to check it out, an assessor to check it out. It can then shift on to internal moderation and external moderation through the seaters as well. So a great deal of functionality, a lot of investment has been made there, but it really means that there's now an end-to-end system available for our clients to use. So that's fantastic for further educational training, any of the CETA based training, higher education, etc. In addition, what we have got is really extra functionality around competencies and matching of competencies to learning paths and learning profiles. And that's also really quite exciting as to what you can do with that. So thank you very much to A New Spring for really making that investment, putting the time and effort in. It's a really good commitment to the South African market. And obviously with sort of 3 million odd people on the New Spring platform, the South African market is not the only focus. So thank you for that. I'm also very pleased with the expansion that we've had, both here in Africa, but we've pushed out a lot over the last 12 months or so. Lots happening in the UK, in Ireland, in Europe, and the Middle East. So it's really great to see that growth, not just locally, but internationally as well. We have of course got a much bigger team, and we've had to grow with the business growth, and that team is very excited about taking on the new challenges for 2023. And I just urge you to please check out our website, newleaftech.co.za or newleafglobal.com. And before I move on, one of the exciting things that we're looking at doing next year is learnerships. And learnerships will really be focused in two main areas. One is about a learnership that specializes in e-learning, and that will come through an IT background. So it will hopefully produce really well-rounded individuals after they've done that learnership. And those are going to be hosted here at Newleaf Technologies, or general learnerships, which clients can host themselves. But do let me know if anybody is interested in learnerships, because it's a fantastic new service that we're going to be offering. So that's my little introduction to you. I'm going to press right on into what I wanted to talk about today. And really, it's what is the right technology in learning? And it's quite a big topic. So I thought the best way that we could really kick off that would be for you to tell me what sort of technology you know of. So we're going to try and use a little thing called Mentimeter. And Shireen, if you could just pop it in the chat quickly, the link that I want you to please go to, you can go to it on your phone as well if you want. Take a picture of the QR code on the right. But that'll take you through to a link, and we can kind of see in real time exactly what sort of technology you're all used to and you all know. I'm going to jump out of my slide any second. So if you want to use the QR code, use it now. Otherwise, please use the link in chat. Okay, just going to give it a couple of seconds. And let me see if I can go into the other side of Mentimeter quickly. Okay, there we go. So LMS, LXP, IMP, animation, WhatsApp groups, video, infographics, Google Classroom, whiteboards, SAP, Moodle. Let's get some more answers, please. You can see at the top of your screen there. If you can't find that link, just go into menti.com and use the code. All of this happening in real time, getting a really good idea of the sort of technology that we're using in the industry as a whole. And as that populates, have a good look at the different technologies that are happening. And I'm sure if we had a wider audience and more time, we would probably see that turning into the thousands. Nice to see a new spring. A lot of you using adaptive learning. So in essence, really what it boils down to is that there is a vast array of technology that people are using across the board. And I'm just going to go into my next slide now. Let me just set that up. So in reality, there's all of this technology that's floating out there, and everybody's using something. But the first thing that I wanted to say is that technology is not the only answer. It's simply a vehicle to get to a solution. And I've seen many clients over the years that give me functionality lists that are from here to next week. And they're looking for technology that does everything. And technology simply doesn't. From a functional perspective, it never can. That would be a complete unicorn. The other thing I see a lot of is clients using really pop-up technology that doesn't fit the wider business tech stack. So they use products in isolation. Whatever technology we are using, we have to think of one key principle, and that key principle is keep the learner in mind. So we have to think about how the learner is going to engage with it. Is it going to be easy for them to access? Is it easy for them to understand? Is it easy for them to follow instructions? The other thing we see a lot of is technology that a lot of money might have been invested in 10 or 15 years ago, and it's become outdated. You know, we've moved away from on-premise solutions. We're now looking at cloud-based solutions. We look at technology popping up, new technology popping up pretty much every time you go on the internet. So we need to make sure that we can keep up to date with what's current. So we need an LMS framework or a learning framework that will work seamlessly with new technology. And we need to think about that because that technology perhaps hasn't even been invented yet. The other nice thing, especially from a learner perspective, is to make sure that they've got one place to go for everything. So, for example, today we're using Zoom for the session. We've just used Mentimeter, and we could look at that list that we've developed collectively. There's all sorts of technology that we can use, and that means a different login or a different URL, a different place to go. And that makes it very difficult for a user to know where to go and what they will be doing there. So one thing that we need to think about when we're using technology is to avoid multiple places for them to go to, or multiple logins, or using these multiple tools in isolation. So really we need to look at a technology that's going to have this good framework that will seamlessly work with these external tools and will continue to work even though those tools haven't been invented yet. So really the main framework is what it's all about, making sure that you can use these different tools in your main LMS framework. And then there's a huge amount of limited use technology. So it's all good and well finding a little app that does A, but you know that's not really it's not a learning ecosystem. It's simply a tool that does one thing. And, you know, because it does one thing, you'll then be looking for another tool that does another thing. So now we end up with a whole lot of tools, and if we haven't got them properly stacked in our toolbox, we're never really going to get to use them properly or even know where they are. The other thing we really have to think about is making learning interesting. Now, we can make learning interesting in all sorts of different ways, and I'll go through that a little bit more during this discussion. But it's imperative that we have multimedia types and multiple learner activity types to keep the learner engaged in what they're doing. So it's no point in just saying, right, we've got a SCORM template and we're just going to make everything in a SCORM file, and it's going to have a bit of an opening to it. It'll discuss the objectives, and that's great. Then do their learning and there's a puzzle. You know, that's not really what it's about. We've got to make it a lot more engaging with different types of activity. Something to really consider, regardless of whatever technology you're using, is always start with the end in mind. So we need to look at this from a learner's perspective. What is their experience going to be? How are they going to access it? How are they going to engage with it? And what do we want to get out of it? All right. So we've got to start, when we're thinking about technology, we start with the end in mind. And starting with the end in mind is kind of, yes, very much about the learners, but it also needs to talk to administration and how things are going to work from that perspective as well. So really, if we look at what do we see in the industry, with all of that technology that's floating about, what are the pain points? And really, the sort of tip of the iceberg is the result. It's poor learner uptake. There's limited progress, maybe limited analytics. Usually there's very little budget for online learning solutions, and the L&D team have got their hands tied. Of course, the result of that is there's poor learning culture, and there's very frantic learning and development departments. But what are those problem areas if we unpack them a little bit more? And really, things are not fun for the learner. There's administrative burden. It's taking a lot of time to update content. It's becoming out of date very quickly. Perhaps there's poor user uptake. They're having difficulty getting into their learning. Or there's a really long video that they've got to watch, and they can't set the time aside to watch a 1.5 hour video. Quite often limited change management, and that talks really to communication internally. Do they actually know what's going on, and how are we communicating with them internally? These days, everybody has got a mobile phone in their pocket, but many systems we see have got very little or no mobile delivery. And that's a big, big issue. Mobile delivery needs to happen, and it needs to be, responsive design. Analytics, no detailed analytics, also a very big problem. Many L&D departments are still delving into exporting into a CSV file and converting the CSV file into Excel, and then adding some filters and analyzing and eventually getting something off to their powers that be or the line manager, and they've got to do that frequently. It's taking up a huge amount of time, and really we want to look at detailed analytics at the touch of a button in real time. Little gamification functionality, that's very much true. That's about two things. It's about limitations within the technology, but it's also about creative limitations, what you can actually do with it. So that maybe needs a little bit more unpacking on another day. We'll talk about gamification and gamification functionality at one of our other sessions. The other thing we see is that learning journeys are not mapped effectively to business objectives, and sometimes from a technology point of view, it's not that practical to do so. But for example, if a person is being onboarded, they need to do course A before course B, and they need to do 5 courses before they qualified to start on the job, for example. So it's getting that all mapped out, not just on a lovely spreadsheet and we've got to add people to this and to do that, but to try and automate that process as well. Sometimes we see learning systems that are not cohesive to L&D's overall strategy. Here we might see a legacy system that really doesn't link to an HRM system. So, if they're adding somebody to payroll, a message has got to be sent to L&D, and those people have got to be put onto the system, and maybe we would have manually put data back into it. So it's just a really, the thing's not flowing properly. All right, and then functionality limitations are mentioned. Bad content that's put together. There's an enormous amount of bad content out there, but there's also a great amount of really good content. Do you have the tools that you need to create good content? The other big change, the big shift that we've had now that we are post-COVID, hopefully, we've got lots of digital nomadics floating around. So how do we get to talk to these people and to engage with them? It's kind of very different to what it was just a few years back. So how do we identify problems? We really need to identify those frustrations. And I want to ask you a question here, and there's a poll which I'd like you to share, please, Shireen, and if you could let us see the results, that would be great. But let's look at what the current situation is.
Thank you so much, Paul. If you would be able to make me host, I had a little technical glitch there.
Okay, so I just run through that. Panelists, you guys are getting to see all of the back end of everything. There we go.
Thank you so much. And I'm launching that poll.
So there you go. What is your current situation? And really what I want you to do is just what statement below most closely reflects your current situation. I see we've got a couple of answers coming in. But let's all of you please just jump in there and start hitting those buttons. And the answers there, I have limited or no current technology. The systems I use are working in isolation to each other. I have poor reporting and analytics. My learners complain about system navigation. My learners find the content boring and don't engage. My systems are integrated. I have a great reporting and there's nothing that I need to do. I'm bound by old legacy technology. All right, so I think pretty much all of you have answered there. And we can see just by doing this poll, we can start to identify what problems there are amongst this particular group of people. So we have nearly 50% of you are using the systems that work in isolation to each other. So they're not living in a framework, they're not working in unison, there's no cohesiveness to what we're doing. And that's something that we need to look out for. 18% have got limited or no current technology. 27% have poor reporting and analytics. 21% learners are complaining about system navigation. 15% my learners find the content boring and don't engage. 8% say my systems are 100%, and I have to call that 8% liars. I'm sorry to say, because we can never get to 100%. We can never get to that end point. We just need to strive to get there. And some people are bound by old legacy technology. So really what's sticking out there for me is kind of what I've just said, and that we're working with a whole bunch of tools, and those bunches of tools are really in isolation. So that needs to come together in a framework of some description. Yes, we definitely need better reporting and analytics. Learners complaining about system navigation is important, because if they can't find something or they can't get into something, you're going to lose them. So that has a very negative connotations for longevity and for that change management, changing the culture. Systems are bound by old technology. 18% of you say that's a problem. That's an interesting one. Because there is old technology, it shouldn't exclude you from using new technology. So you can park an LXP, a learner experience platform, next to your legacy LMS system, and we can get the two to talk to each other so that the user experience happens in the LXP, but the administration happens in the LMS. So I think that's really interesting, and thank you for doing that little quick poll. So what are we really seeing here? What all of those things add up to is a poor return on investment. And if we look at that poor return on investment, it's not any one thing. Technology is perhaps a part of it, but it's all sorts of other things. So we're looking at what are the barriers to performance? What is stopping us? And, if you look at that poll and you pushed it out into your own organizations or your own fields, you'd start to get some of the answers straight away. It's really no longer sufficient to really, to just be the knowledge and skills team now, and being reactive. We've got to make sure that we've got good technology, we can drive performance, we can be proactive, and we've got a proactive strategy plus the good technology to give us the good result. We also need to diagnose what's going on. So if we haven't got analytics, how can we diagnose? So we look at across the board, look at all the potential barriers to performance and try and uncover what those causes are and how do we come up with an intervention. So we need to be very critical. So we really need to do the research before we choose the tools. Ultimately, once we can analyze things, we can do those deep analytics. If we've got that built into the system, it becomes an ongoing analysis. So we can start to really pick up problem areas before they become too big. And ultimately, what we're trying to do here is change the learning culture. All right. So where most companies are currently at is at operational level, where training is impacted. It's at that, the little tip of the iceberg there. There's lots of intensive administrative functions required, and we've seen that from the poll. And there's a lot of inefficiency, hard to analyze data effectively. And really what we've got to do is we've got to move across to the right. So let's look at it from a strategic perspective. Let's make sure that our training aligns to the organizational objectives. We've got clear outcomes, and we're using the right technology in a much bigger way. Ultimately, we're going to find maturity. A new platform perhaps takes a bit of time to get going on, but ultimately it needs to be embedded in the culture. It needs to be mature. It needs to be the go-to place, and it needs to talk to all of the organizational goals. So if we talk now about a learning ecosystem, what does that actually mean? So an ecosystem would be either your LMS or your LXP living in the middle there, and that needs to have really good functionality and really good capacity to talk to other systems. So yes, have a built-in authoring tool, fantastic, but does it have responsive design? Does it have SCORM? What other tools can we use that are outside of that ecosystem? Can we use WhatsApp? And all of those things need to come into your ecosystem. So you need to make sure your platform can cope with that sort of thing. Then we start talking about learner experience. Let's go and think about how are they logging in there. Are they already in an HRM system? They've been put onto payroll. They've got an employee self-service tab on the intranet. Now they need to click a button and it takes them into their learning. So things like single sign-on, Active Directory sign-on, all of those things formulate part of the plan of creating a fantastic user experience. System integrations talks to administration. You know, it's no good getting an email from payroll saying add Joe Soap onto our learning platform because he's just started. That's manual. Why can't we just integrate it? External activities. Remember, I said it's not just about content, it's about creating activities that are interesting. So things like, can we do virtual sessions within a platform? Is one place to go, but you know, if we're using Zoom, why aren't we going into Zoom through our normal method of accessing our learning rather than an extra or outside link that needs to be sent? Let's do our assessments in one platform. Things like video feedback. Let's record, use our cell phones that are now currently in our pockets. So all of those sorts of external activities, and I've only given you a few there, we really need to engage with these things, but make sure that they're living in our ecosystem and not living in isolation. Of course, source systems. Source systems can be your HRM, but maybe it's your CRM. If you're running a training business, somebody's finished a course, we need to push them back to the CRM so that we can send them a message and upsell them the next course. Everything working in unison and automated. So if you look at a sort of a normal business environment, we've got an HRM system, the human resources management system, and let's link that to our learner experience platform so we can auto-subscribe users. We can synchronize this. We can integrate as much as possible. It doesn't have to have one integration point. And we can also pull data back to the system if we need to. So we have a master there with the HRM and a slave with the LXP. The LXP can offer a variety of activities. We've got things like peer collaboration. We can send auto notifications. Maybe we've got instructor-led stuff happening in the platform. Maybe knowledge retention system to ensure that their knowledge levels are maintained. We've got lots of content resources that we can use inside the platform, but also outside the platform. And of course, it's easy for users to find content. Then we can look at, well, what about on the bottom left there, external training, because that's always happening and that doesn't really live in a platform, but it needs to live somewhere. Those reports that you have on external training can live on the right-hand side, they're training intelligence. So we can have an intelligent report from your HRM to LXP, come up with a sort of global picture that takes what's happening online, what's happening offline, and put it into a training intelligence system. And Philip's going to talk about this a little bit later in the session. But we now start looking at real-time data. We can pre-analyze it. It's slick and easy. We can send it off to line managers. We send them a link. They can look at it in real time. High level of diagnostics, quick visuals, see what's happening in the training, what sort of interventions do we need. And it's easy to drill down to greater detail when you need to. So it's simple reporting. Very similar sort of thing. You've got an HRM, link it to your LMS or your LXP, no isolation. You've got a training module in your HRM, maybe that manages external training or classroom-based training. Link that to your LXP, link that to training intelligence, and create this ecosystem that talks to itself. So that's around about the systems, but what about the actual learning? So when it comes to learning, remember I said we don't want that one size fits all and we've got a template and storyline and thanks, so that's what we do. Let's jumble things up a little bit. Maybe we're going to have a quiz. Maybe we're going to have classroom training. Maybe we're going to have animations. Maybe we're going to create challenges or game-based activities. Maybe there's one-on-one coaching. Maybe there's job aids where that can help them as they go forward. Maybe there's things like simulations. So all of these sorts of things perhaps need to go into your learning journey. So, you know, there's PDFs, there's tutorials, there's quizzes, there's badges, there's infographics. Jumble it up and use that technology to your best advantage to make your learner as engaged as possible. If you look at a platform like New Spring, obviously it's got a really good learner experience. That's what it's designed for. But you can use it for one-on-one coaching or virtual instructor-led classroom training. You can create content in it, but you can also use outside tools to create content in it. And you can also use outside tools to build activities in it. And that helps you to deliver a really exceptional learning journey that a learner is going to enjoy, and they're going to take that knowledge in. We can also do things like adaptive learning, going into a little bit more detail there. Another day, another discussion. We can integrate it to all sorts of things to automate your process. It's in the cloud and it's completely secure. ISO 27001 compliant. So that's a general picture for me about what learning technology is about. And the takeaways are, whatever technology you use, it's got to be fit for purpose and it has to fit into that bigger picture. It really must keep the learner front of mind. If we start off with something that's good and easy for administration, is it good and easy for the learner? Or are we dropping the ball somewhere? There's got to be the solid framework, and you need to be able to use new learning tools as they as they come about and they're developed. We have to have analytics at the touch of our fingertips. It's no good getting information a month later after the reports have been through the CSV Excel analytics process manually. And always, always, always start with the learner in mind. Start with the end in mind. All right, and I think that about sums it up from me. Thank you, and happy to take any questions at the end of the session. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for that very engaging and fantastic talk, Paul. I am going to tell you a little bit more about our next speaker. But first, I'd like to say that, as Paul describes the right technology in learning development, it's almost as if he's created this vehicle in which we can now begin our learning. But what is the engine of this vehicle? What is the substance of it? And that is what our next speaker, Kirsha Karshan, is going to be talking about. How and why a storyboard is key. So Kirsha's been brain flip there, has been in the industry for quite a few years now. She started in media development and has found her love in instructional design. In her free time, you can find her at her sewing machine or in the mountain paths with her dog. So I'm going to hand it over to Shilka now to tell us about why a storyboard is key. And if you have any questions during the session, please do put them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So over to you, Shilka.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shulka, and I'm very excited to be here and to, kind of get everyone more familiar with the back end of things. We often see, we have our little kickoff meetings and things, and then us little gremlins go off and work on everything in the back end. So very exciting to be able to share a little bit of that process with you. I'm just going to share my screen, and then we can get started. Cool. So what we're going to be talking about, how and why a storyboard is key. And, if you guys have any questions, if you've got, even if you've got some tips and maybe your own rituals or processes, please feel free to put that in the chat box and in the Q&A box, so we can have a chat about it at the end. I'd also love to learn from everyone else here. Cool. So what, how and why a storyboard is key. It really is, the framework and the backbone of an entire e-learning program. It's a foundation for a really great e-learning experience, and it allows us to take the raw content and transform it into this really engaging and exciting final product that our learners see and that we hope that they enjoy. It's a framework for the content where we work it into more of an experience rather than just a lecture. And during this phase, we want to look at all the different aspects of an e-learning course so that we can create something that's really well-rounded. So what is the best way to present this content? It's one of the most important questions that we've got to ask ourselves. And during this time, we start to think about, okay, we'll look at our content and be like, oh, what could be a video? What could be a 360 experience? What kind of imagery do we want to use and help us to portray the message behind all this content? But something that's also really important to remember here, and I remember an English teacher in high school always told us when it came to our writing is you want something that's interesting and engaging. You want to show and not tell. You also don't want to have this gaudy Christmas tree at the end of it with all your tinsels and your lights and your baubles, but it's just something overwhelming. We've got to think about, what are we doing? Is this media, is it going to be enhancing our content really? We don't want to give our learners any visual fatigue, which I think is something that's really difficult, to strike that balance. At this stage, we also want to be thinking about the kind of interactions we want to include that will keep our learners engaged and excited and make the content exciting. Because, as streamlined as we want to make it, we want to really have it be exciting. We want our learners to want to learn. So, what is our goal with an e-learning course? We really want to deliver the content in a way that's accessible, and all the lessons in the content, we want to deliver it in a way that encourages people to explore those topics. Our target audience is really adults with busy lives. We've all got lots of work to do. We've got things we want to achieve in our personal lives, families to spend time with. So when we ask adults to go through a learning course, we need to make it worth their while. We've got to make it something that captures their interest and engages their brain. And making learning exciting for an adult is really tough. So we've got to put in a lot of thought, to make sure we do strike that balance, between engaging and informative, while still maintaining the value for our organizations and our learners. I'm going to talk about the three main elements of your storyboard for the next little bit. So we've got our three elements that I would say are the key things in your storyboard, which is your main idea, your content, and your design cues. Right, your main idea. So this information will come often directly from your discussions with your clients, in your kickoff meetings and your sales meetings. when you're just having a chat with your client to figure out, what is it that they want? What is the purpose of the course? Is it for compliance training? Is it a policy? Is it, some extra skills that will benefit their learners? Is it, like training courses on a specific subject? A big one, I think, is it compulsory or is it opt-in? Because that also really changes how, as developers and designers, how we will look at it. And then I think one of the most important parts really is, what do you want to achieve with this course? As an organization, what do you want your learners to walk away knowing and taking away from it? And, as an instructional designer, you'll go through all this content. Once you've received it, you'll have a read through and you'll start to form ideas in your brain slowly. You'll envision what you want it to look like. And oftentimes with me, I'll have some content and I'm really excited by it. And I just know what I want that end product to look like. But, I have to tell myself, don't get too ahead of yourself, because you've got to first get the structure and the formalities out of the way before you can really get into that meat of the content. Because once you can get that structure down, it gives you a really good framework to base the rest of your content on, and allow you to create something that is well-rounded. All right, the content. This is the nice meaty part of our entire process. So first, you'd want to have, of course, your read through and really familiarize yourself with your content. And I think this section specifically is going to be the time where, you guys will share with me if you have any specific rituals when it comes to doing your storyboarding, because I think we all create in so many different ways, and I'd really love to know with the other professionals out there how you're doing it. So one of the kind of slightly boring bits, I would say, in the whole instructional design process is, mapping out your objectives and your outcomes. But it is something that's extremely important. This is something, this information you might get directly from the client. Oftentimes we'll have a client come to us and they know exactly what it is that they're testing. And they've got a whole document with their objectives already. Sometimes this might also just come from the discussion with your client. And other times, it's something that you've got to figure out. And, once you go through that process and have those discussions with them, you can kind of start to understand a little bit more about what it is your client wants. Then we've got to think about testing. Are we going to include any assessments? Are they going to be formative assessments, or will they maybe be summative assessments? You're going to start to think about, will it be conducted maybe at the end of the entire course, at the end of a module? Maybe you actually want to have it a little bit more casual, and you want it to be just some knowledge check quiz questions, scattered throughout the content. Depending on what you want to achieve at the end, will also help determine, how you're going to conduct this assessment and where you're going to put it in. Then after that, you'll want to work out your structure of the course and how you're breaking it down. Often you're going to hear things about, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And this is exactly what you're going to do with your content. You're going to break it down. You're going to split it into, maybe you're going to split it into a couple of modules, maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3 or 4. In those modules, are you going to further split them up into units? You've got to think about all these things and think about, once again, your learner. It's really important to make sure that you group your content into little bite-sized chunks so that your learner can plan out their learning timetable. We said adults are really busy and often don't have the time to, fit learning into their schedule. So it's really important to take into consideration and what I like to do is think, okay, what kind of time chunks will I be happy to sit and do in a learning course? And maybe you want to split it into some micro learning, put it into this bite-sized chunks so that if a learner comes and is able to do a session, and they can do an entire unit or an entire module in this short period of time, that's going to be more likely, it's going to be more likely for them to come back to the learning, because they'll be able to go through a learning experience and go through an entire unit, an entire section, and walk away having felt like they learned something, that they achieved something, that they are actually making progress in this course. And it's a really good way to make sure that your learners stay motivated, because it's really difficult to find that time. So you want there to be a reward at the end of every learning session. Once you've gone through your content, now it gets to the exciting stuff. You can really think about the design, and you can start to communicate that vision in your head. You've been thinking about it for ages. You've been dreaming about it. Sometimes I know I'll go to sleep and I'll dream about the course that I'm working on and what I want to do with it. So now you can actually start putting that all together. You break up the content and you give some direction on the media, and all those other experiences and interactions that's going to make it really exciting and really valuable. This is the time when you're going to also think about, what kind of activities are you going to include in your learning program? Are you going to maybe use some flashcard activities? How can you maybe use some gamification? When you've got a client who's, really keen for some exciting stuff, it gets really fun for the design team, because then we can start to do some things that we don't often get a chance to do. We can really, really get creative and exciting and adventurous. Maybe you create an entire story. Maybe you create a whole gaming experience. It's all about, making it exciting for your learners so that they keep coming back. Then we've got some principles that we can apply. If you, having a little bit of a struggle, or if you just want to have a bit of a method to map out your content a little bit better and structure that content so that you can provide a really seamless learning journey. So in instructional design, we've got a couple of these principles that can help you develop that storyboard and get it to flow really well, which is something that's really important. So first, we've got Bloom's taxonomy. And if there are any teachers in the audience, you'll be very familiar with a lot of these, but especially Bloom's, I think. This is one that I actually learned from my teacher friends. And it's something that I find so valuable. Bloom's taxonomy uses the hierarchy of learning, where you think about how to present new content and how to maximize it so that your learner understands and can remember. The next one we've got, which I think is probably the most popular in instructional design, is the ADDIE method, which it takes you all the way from conception right to the end, post-launch, once you've gone live with your content and your learning program, and it helps you find how to evaluate all that content and how to use your reporting in a way to possibly better your learning experience for the next time, but also as an organization to be able to have a look and see what worked and what didn't, where your learners are, what they're engaging with more, and perhaps what they need more encouragement with. Then we've got the SAM method, which is basically ADDIE, but a very, very simplified version. And then next we've got Gagne's 9 events of instructional design. So this is where your learning journey is broken up into 3 stages with 3 events each. It's a great method for your blended learning solutions when you're perhaps looking at doing some instructor-led training, some, in-person, face-to-face learning. Maybe you want to do some workshops. Gagni's is a really, really valuable one to use because it takes you through all of those different methods you can use during that face-to-face training. And then the last one I'll talk about today is Merrill's first principles. So this is 5 principles that helps you combine your learner's own knowledge with maybe some experience-based case studies and some real-world knowledge in order to create a really effective learning program. This is really valuable when you're trying to perhaps reinforce some knowledge, or perhaps just to upskill people when they already have some knowledge and they're already in the field or something, and you actually just want to take that learning a step further. So once you put all these steps together, you've got a really good framework and a foundation for a successful and valuable learning program. You can now hand over to your development team, and this is where the real magic is going to come into play. They're going to work their magic and create all your videos and your 360s and bring it all to life. And this is the stage where you get closer and closer to your final product. And that's what the client really sees. They don't see all of the other work that gets put into it, but it's so rewarding once you get to look at that final product and see how fantastic it looks and how everything is just working together really well. And it hasn't just, you didn't just snap your fingers and create this amazing thing. It's taken lots of work and lots of thought to develop something that looks good and that's going to be conducive to a wonderful learning experience. So that's my little bit on how and why a storyboard is key. We are going to include some downloadables for you guys. We've got a course design plan that Newleaf works off of to help us kind of build this framework. We've also got a little bit of a process. I walk you through, it's almost a storyboard template. It's where I walk you through almost my process in creating a storyboard and how I approach things. So we've got those things for you that we will share after our eLearning Indaba. And if you've got any questions, we'll happily answer them in the panel discussion at the end. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that great talk, Shilka. And now that we sort of know how this vehicle, how this engine is built, how this car is driving, the next step is, how do you know if it works? Or how do you know how it's being received? So we're going to be moving on to our next speaker, who is Philip Hanley. Philip started in the e-learning industry as a voiceover artist. He then got involved in advanced content development and systems administration, and then he naturally progressed to customer-centric role. And now 6 years on, he has been part of over 50 successful implementations for many companies across South Africa. So I'm going to hand it over to Philip.
Thank you so much, Shireen, and hello, everybody.
And just a quick note, if you do have any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A pod, which is at the bottom of your screen. Back over to you, Philip.
Thanks, Shireen. Just want to check you can all hear me. Everything is cool. And I'm going to be sharing my screen. All right. Perfect. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks again for joining. I hope you're enjoying this, our final eLearning Indaba of 2022. My name is Philip Hanley, and I'm the Customer Success Director here at Newleaf Technologies. And today we're going to be discussing a little bit about analytics. And as much as it pains people to admit, and it won't be the first time you hear this, but we live in a data-driven world. Every single digital action that we take is recorded by people like Facebook and Google and so on. And those companies use that data to generate income through targeted advertising, through, I mean, Facebook, for instance, they reported operating profits of $46 billion last year. And 98% of that came through advertising. In 2021, it was found that 3,026,626 emails were sent every minute of every day. And 67% of those emails were spam. Now that means that 2/3 of all emails sent were essentially meaningless. And the same can be said about a lot of the data that is recorded. Some data will hold more value than other data. And the success of companies like Google and Facebook is not in their ability to collect our data, but rather in their ability to analyze it and to act based on that analysis. So what can we do as learning and development to ensure continuous improvement of our courses, to ensure increased learner uptake and adoption, a better understanding of a learner's knowledge gaps, and to guarantee a return on investment? Well, let's start with analysis. It's often believed that LMS reports are only useful to those in the L&D department. But we actually need to look at the different stakeholders involved. Senior management will want to see a completely different report and completely different metrics to those that team leaders might want to see. And we almost have to have different reports for the different levels of business. And this is something that now puts a lot of pressure on L&D departments. A few years ago, we at Newleaf Tech gave the undertaking to ease that pressure. Part of the frustration was the time-consuming and incredibly tedious amount of time that it took to analyze these endless Excel spreadsheets. So we needed something that was highly visual as well as impactful, but also automated. And the aim was to leverage off the already existing data in your LMS to provide real-time reporting dashboards. So we developed something called the Training Intelligence System. And here we can present data in a format that is already well on its way to being analyzed. Now, you'll want to look at metrics on 3 different levels. You would look at things like course insights. So what's happening in these courses? What are the completion rates? And what are your most popular courses? You'll basically just want to get a rounded view of your course's performance. You'll also then want to look at your activity insights. And here we can look at which activities are the most popular. What types? Is it PDF files? Is it video? Is it text and imagery? What sort of formats do our learners enjoy? And as well, if it's a linear course and learners need to complete each activity in some sort of order, at what point are we seeing bottlenecks? If it's a range of performance topics, you can look at the topics that are visited the most. What are employees most interested in? And you can use this information to identify shortfalls in either the content, all right, or the delivery. How are you delivering that content? And the last thing we need to look at is learners. So how are learners actually performing? How long are they spending on the system? And you can look at the relationship between maybe courses and job roles. You can also look at some of their login data. What are the trends that are being shown? Where are the learners logging in? When are the learners logging in? And when are they engaging with the system? What's also nice about this is you can actually now see the trends over time. So either on a month-to-month basis or on a year-to-year basis. And when you have these sort of systems for a number of years, you can also start to see how they're improving and what progress you're making. And I'd like to, at this point, take you into one of the systems. So first of all, let's have a look at the Training Intelligence System a little bit, and we'll go through a brief overview here. So this is now a demo system that we've got, and here we've got a little bit of an overview on what's happening. So what are our subscription completions? How many courses do we have? How many learners do we have? as well as what is their login information, what is their preferred learning time and day. And you can use this information now to go and actually look and to communicate with learners. What is the subscription status? How many have not started? How many are in progress? So it's a really nice visual overview of what's happening in your courses and your completion rates. Then you can go and start to dive in and have a look at each of these courses. And based on those completion rates, you can start to think of areas where you can improve. So start to think of where some of those gaps are. And the same things with your subscription. So what your learners are up to, what the activities are like. And we mentioned, is it a video? Is it a PDF? What type of content do learners enjoy? And maybe that could be a reason why we're seeing bottlenecks. Learners, every single time it gets to module 3, and module 3 is a PDF and it's just text, learners start to drop off and they don't continue with the next activity. So you can start to look and diagnose those sorts of things, as well as looking at individual learners. Maybe there's been an issue with a specific learner and you now need to go and they've made a mistake. You now need to go and see what they've been up to. Have they actually done their training? And Trinity, who some of you might know, you can see hasn't done any of his. And then as well, the system usage. What is the login variance? What are the time preferences for these learners? What are the days that they're logging in? If you prefer your learners to be logging in sort of after office hours, then you can start to look at that information and see when they all are logging in rather. And the same thing with, your existing LMS. It'll have a dashboard similar to this, where you can see within your courses what the learners are up to, how many have started, how many have not started, and as well the progress, and diving down deeper into activities and looking at, for instance, surveys, seeing what learners have completed and what some of their answers have been. And based off this information, you can now start to go and have a look and start to diagnose. So once we analyze our data, we need to then take proactive steps and we need to take action. And the first thing we can look at is engagement, learner engagement. And engagement is one of the key metrics in e-learning, and it's most likely your highest priority. It's important to determine the reason why it might be low. And it might be one of the following. It might be that your employees are unaware that the training exists, which I know might sound a little bit strange, but it's actually something that we see quite often. So something like as simple as a PR campaign, something, your internal marketing campaigns that will help to at least get employees aware of your training. And you can do this through multiple channels, your intranet. You can do this through WhatsApp groups, email, Slack or Teams, whatever you guys use internally. Start to use those channels to actually send out information and make learners aware. It's also important, and probably goes without saying, but getting your manager buy-in. If management is on board with the training and they place a high level of importance on it, then it's likely that your learners will start to go and engage with the content. All right, because it's starting from the top. The other thing is the content actually working? And if not, maybe it's boring, maybe it's bulky or unengaging, maybe it's irrelevant to their jobs. The employees maybe don't like it and they lack motivation. You can start to look at these things and start to identify where those gaps were. And when you do that, you can create, you can start to change your courses, you can create smaller modules, and so on. And you can start to also implement some of those instructional design principles that Shilka was telling us about. And of course, that can be quite difficult, and we don't expect you guys to be able to do that all yourself. So getting advice from people within the industry, instructional designers, content developers, having them work with subject matter experts, and working alongside you to meet both L&D and business goals will be a really important step in improving those courses. You can also share that data with the instructional designers, and you can use those reports to set some realistic training objectives and to fine-tune your existing ones. Now, having this information about each course and module can actually give you a better understanding of your learners' strengths and weaknesses, and it'll allow you to close some of those knowledge gaps a bit better. And in terms of those bottlenecks in your courses where you see the learners are dropping out at a certain point, you could also do things like trigger a workflow where an automated email notification gets sent out. When learners aren't scoring well on assessments, maybe you can trigger interventions and you can get your instructors more actively involved within the courses. You also need to remember that these test scores and how their knowledge about a particular subject has increased is, or at least after taking the course, is information that you can actually share with the senior management. So we're starting to take action on learner engagement is one of the key things. But the other thing that you'll need to look at is return on investment. And measuring your ROI can actually help L&D teams justify the investment by providing evidence and provide evidence that the training is effective to those stakeholders involved. And we've actually got a bit of a case study here where the Society for Human Resource Management stated that measuring return on investment also helps quantify the effectiveness of learning and identify areas for improvement. It helps you determine specific goals in terms of changes in cost to company, in terms of the time it takes to learn, and in terms of employee behavior. It also helps you to build trust and credibility for the L&D function, so people start to become more confident in the L&D benefits. And it helps you determine the overall L&D budget for the next year. Now, we can see that ROI is something that's really important. But in 2021, another survey was done that found that only 8% of L&D teams actually calculate their ROI. And if measuring e-learning ROI is actually that important, then why are we not doing it? And the answer is actually because it's a little tricky. Historically, the emphasis in calculating ROI has been on tangibles. Things such as time, salary, cash outlay, sales, and other factors that can be quantified, measured, or at costs of training, training rooms, and so on. But the difficulty comes in measuring the intangible stuff. How are we going to measure employee engagement, attitudinal changes, or the impact of learning on an organization's culture, their mission, their people, and brand? So how do we do that? Well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel as such. And if you're using something like the Kirkpatrick's model already, then using the adapted Phillips ROI method, and no, it's not my method. It's a guy called Jack Phillips who built onto the Kirkpatrick's 4-level model to create a 5-level methodology. And I won't go into great detail on this, but you would start with the initial reaction to the existing training through some sort of survey or assessment. You then look at your training intelligence system or your LMS reports to see if the learners were actually able to learn and understand the knowledge and skills that the course set out to accomplish. And you can use things like Memo Trainer on a Newsspring to ensure that that knowledge is actually retained over time. And then we go into our final steps of measuring the behavior change. And after a month or two, we can actually start to interview learners and get involved with them. And you can select a few learners with different levels of competency and go through those interviews. And maybe it's on-the-job observation or something like that. And then finally, we measure our ROI. And we can do this using a simple calculation where we can compare the outcomes of the training to the total cost of the training. And we can show the full value of our training programs. So that's it from my side. I know we are running out of time a little bit, But I just wanted to say that it's difficult to get everything across in 15 minutes, and we could literally be chatting about this for hours. But from my side, I'm really super proud to be part of a team here at Newleaf Tech that actually wants you to succeed and wants to assist you and uplift you and make sure that you're reaching your L&D goals and your business goals. So if you need any advice or any additional information, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And also remember that these analytical tools are diagnostic tools. The important part is really what you're subscribing as the solution for some of these problems. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Philip. That was a very interesting talk. We do have some questions that have come in, so I think it's time for us to do a Q&A. So I'm going to invite Paul and Shulka, and we've also got Nick and Michael who are going to join us for the Q&A session over here. And got a question coming in saying, what do you think the best approach is to breaking down content into a learning journey?
All right, so with that one, there's quite a nice way to put it. Actually, we call it chunking. And there are many ways to do this, and you can look at online. There's so many different resources, and they walk you through the countless of ways. But the two ways that I like to look at it is the first one would be just your cognitive boundaries. I would look at things that make sense together, and I like to also combine only about like 3 to 5 topics or ideas at a time, because again, that keeps it small. And that allows us to keep it into that bite-sized little chunk and section. But you think about, what makes sense together. What learning can you, and what content can you put together where you can kind of reorganize it a little bit. You can paraphrase, you can take out all the unnecessary fluff, and really just put it together and it makes sense. That works well, and that's my favorite way of doing it, because I think it's also the easiest and most seamless. The other way of doing it that I like to use also is looking at the outcomes. So you take your specific learning outcomes and you think about the concepts that you've got in your content and how they relate to each outcome. Again, I would take about 3 to 5, maybe even 2, maybe 6 concepts per outcome, and then group those together. And then after that, I would then add in, my relevant content material and things. And then after that, bring in the multimedia and, video and any of those kinds of things, even assessments. I would also then look at where I can use video and some multimedia in place of content. So those are the 2 ways that I like to kind of do that chunking.
Excellent. Thank you so much for answering that. I hope that it was an anonymous question, so I hope that helped. We have Melinda, who has posted that you mentioned that you have learnership opportunities available. Will this include people already in the industry that want to unlearn and relearn, upskill? Have you considered offering a qualification that a person can register or to complete a qualification?
Thanks, Belinda. Thank you for the question there. So we are introducing a specialization in e-learning. It will be a registered qualification. We hope to have that available in the new year. So we'll be having our first intake in about February. It really is designed for the unemployed, but certainly it would be an option to look at that. Part of it is a lot of hands-on practical experience, and it will be registered with the MICT CETA.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Michael and Melinda. I hope that helps you. And then I've got a question in from Haley. I think this is directed at Shulka. She says, I'm currently using a 1 scenario thought a module of learning. Do you have any pointers on how to use this option in learning, and any ideas on how to keep this type of learning engaging?
Yeah, so I think what Haley's talking about is, I mentioned briefly in my talk about having a story that you kind of work through from the beginning of a course all throughout to the end. And then there, to keep it engaging and exciting, I would say really build that story. If you've got to create characters or whatever it is, that can be really valuable. I would also bring some case studies in there, just to help people connect and give them a little bit more of a real world example to relate to. And I would also then definitely make use of the multimedia. 360s are really awesome to use, and they work really well when you've got an awesome theme going through throughout the entire project, and also your videos. Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. And I've got another one from Mandy has asked here, why is the learnership only offered to unemployed? Or Michael?
So just to clarify that, it will be an NQF level 5 learnership. We are very open to having employed, unemployed intakes, but it's definitely not closed off for that. I think the purpose behind it is really to try and drive skills within the industry in South Africa. So even if you are already a learning and development professional, I think it would definitely benefit you. Shireen, I saw there was also a question earlier that was posted in the webinar chat
Yes.
from Kate Whitaker, and she asked, what are the factors that make content accessible? Do you use the principles of universal design and reference the guidance around enabling inclusive learning? And I thought that was a really great question, and one that is quite broad to answer. So, when keeping a learner in mind, you've got to understand that that individual has a different background, and you have to consider things like learning style. So people like to learn in different ways. Some might like to learn visually, some might like to learn kinesthetically or through touch, being tactile, or through auditory. They might also have ESL or English as a second language. So how do you cater for those types of individuals? And then if you look at WCAG, the Web Accessibility Guidelines, you've got to have things like text to speech. And a lot of the online learning platforms, especially the ones under our banner, do facilitate that opportunity to really make it accessible. I think within the context of South Africa, one thing to keep in mind there is also data costs and accessibility through mobile. So there's a lot of things to sort of keep in mind, but there's definitely a lot of solutions at that to answer that question. We've also recently introduced, it's fairly new to us, but a text-to-speech function within our platform that allows you to convert your text on screen or on-screen text to speech in all 11 official languages, which is really great for accessibility.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Michael. I see we've just got a question in for Philip. And the question is, will I be able to use data analytics, the progress of the course, etc., to one, directly import into a report, and two, will it be able to generate reports automatically based on learners' performance and tracking the programs?
So yeah, I mean, with these reports, it is definitely possible to bring outside sources, and you can link outside sources. Of course, the really important thing with these types of reports is the data that you put in. So, if your data is a mess or in some sort of format that is difficult to use and to work with, then of course that's the first step. So having clean data right up front is the first step. And then, yeah, of course, we can bring in those reports and we can use them to track programs and so on. If it's linked directly to an LMS, then that's all automated, and you won't have to do anything on that side.
Excellent. Thank you, Philip. We've got one more question that's just popped in from Janet. Janet would like to know, how would work-related practical components of a blended course be implemented in your platforms? For example, a participant in the course is required to conduct a work-related activity and then upload the results of the activity.
That's a really fantastic question. Thanks, Janet. Well, there's quite a few ways to do so. One of the activities within the platform that we have is a video hand-in function that allows you to record your screen or to record a video and use that as a hand-in assessment, which is really great for practical activities that you conduct within the workplace. The other thing I would suggest is looking at something like a 360 review, where you might be linking a peer or a line manager or subject matter expert to really just conduct a behavioral analysis of that particular individual's progress within that skill or arena on the workplace, within the workplace. So if they're doing something practically, that can be measured pretty straightforward in that regard.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for that, Michael. I hope that helps Janet. And I think we are at 11:30 South African time. So I think we are going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending the final eLearning Indaba of this year. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much to our speakers, Shulke, Paul, Philip, and Michael and Nick also for helping answer these questions. And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
We look forward to seeing you at the next Indaba in the new year.